Hello, my name is Kyle, and today I'll be presenting on radio waves. So, let's get started. This is a big question. What is radio? Now, radio is any kind of communication using electromagnetic waves or radio waves. Radio waves are a type of electromagnetic waves. You can see right here on this chart, there's this stuff, there's tons of stuff up here, and then there's radio frequencies. And these are the things that you'll typically be communicating with. Oh dear. Now, radio waves are made up of, they're kind of like sound waves. They have wavelengths, which is the distance between two waves, frequency, which is the amount of time it takes to reach one wavelength, so the amount of time it takes to reach this distance while being sent, that is the frequency. I keep pressing buttons. And then amplitude, which is the space up and down. So here's the crest, here's the trough. It's the top and the bottom. The distance between those two is amplitude. So something with a shorter wavelength would have a higher frequency. And yeah. So how are radio waves sent? Radio waves are sent originally off through an antenna. They're caught by an antenna and then they're received and decoded. So here's another way to look at it. Although ignore this part, the yellow part. Those ones are a little too high concept for right now. We're still learning. So basically, it's something is made. It's taken, it's made into a radio wave, it's sent off through the antenna, it's caught, it's decoded, and then it's played back. So now we have, how does a radio setup work? So there's, oh crap, sorry, it's a settle board. It's gone. Okay. Well, can I make a new one? Okay, well, I'm gonna try and make a new one, so bear with me. Alakadabra, alakazam. Make a new thing for my presentation. Yay! Okay. So this is basically what I was talking about before. It goes in through a microphone. It's turned into a thing and then it's sent off through an antenna. But I'm going to break that down a little bit smaller. So first, it's taken in through the microphone. So I talk into it, talk into this, blah, blah, blah. That is then amplified, so it's made louder, and then it goes through this modulator, which just turns it into a radio wave. So there's a difference between sound waves and radio waves, but this modulator just turns sound waves into radio waves. This oscillator changes the frequency of the radio wave, effectively kind of making it the right size, which when you adjust the frequency knob, when you're flipping through radio stations and it says the frequency there, you're actually changing the frequency of the waves that you're looking for. That radio wave is then amplified, and then it's sent off through the antenna. And this grounding, I believe, is just for safety. Grounding just means an electrical connection to the actual ground, and it has to do a lot more with electricity than radio waves, so I'm not going to get into it. Now, what are the different types of communication? There are many types of communication. Let's go through them one by one. So this top one here is continuous wave, which typically is a lot rarer. Gosh, I can't say that word. I don't have a speech impediment. I can say my R's just fine. Are you okay? Yeah, I can say that. Rarer? Why? Okay, it's much less common than some of the others down here, but it's typically used for Morse code. So you can see this one right here, it doesn't stop. It's a radio wave that just keeps on going. This one, despite being called continuous wave, is not continuous. It has breaks, and it's like, instead of being one doot, it's doot 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 doot, which the astute, those of you that are very astute might have noticed that sounds a lot like Morse code, which is what it's used for. It's used for Morse code, and it's typically just used to communicate Morse code over radio, you know? So it's not the most common, because like, people don't really use Morse code anymore, but you'll still see people using it because it's relatively cheap to use, and it's decent signal strength. Yikes, I almost knocked off my water. It is good water. It's decent. AM, I mean, I don't know why I said it's decent, like I'm reviewing these. Like, the new CW Model S. Now, this new model has made a lot of improvements. The camera quality is much nicer now. But there's AM, which stands for amplitude modulation. It says changes here, but it's modulation. It does just mean changes, though. So to convey the information stored inside the wave, it's, instead of changing the frequency or anything, it's changing the amplitudes of the wave. The frequency stays the same throughout. It's just changing the amplitudes to get across that message. So you'll notice that all of these carry information in a different way. This one carries information directly through the waves itself. This one carries information kind of embedded into the wave. This one I haven't explained yet. Now, AM is, I don't know why I did that whole tangent. Whatever. I'm getting off track. Okay. AM is pretty decent. I think it's a little cheaper than FM, this one down here. I think it's a little cheaper, but in exchange, the audio quality typically isn't that great when being played back. It's not awful. It's useful to a certain point. Now we have FM down here, or PM, frequency modulation or pulse modulation, but typically frequency modulation. Now, before I explain it, you might be thinking, that's like what the radio stations say at the end there, like 94.7 FM, Alternative Portland. I don't know why I have that memorized. But like, that's what they're referring to. When you hear about FM or PM or AM, it's radio waves, which I thought that was really cool when I first found out about that. Oh yeah, I have my camera on. How did I forget that I had my camera on? I did a whole... I'm losing it. Okay. FM. Now, FM is kind of like AM, except the exact opposite. This time, the amplitude always stays the same, does not change. Instead of going da-da-da, it's straight lines, all right? But this time, the frequency is what changes. And so it's basically the exact opposite of AM, which is pretty interesting. It has better sound quality. However, in exchange, it is way more expensive to use. It is like good for like really big radio stations. I also think there's more limitations on it. So like, I think that you could only use FM at certain times, but I could be wrong. That's something for you to look into. Now there's this, which is, I don't need to break it down. It's kind of just another way to look at it, you know? Well, anyway, speaking of something for you to look into, if you have been interested by any of this stuff, I've only been covering the very basics. it gets way more in depth. It gets really cool. You can bounce radio waves off of the ionosphere to make them go further. So instead of just shooting a radio wave at someone, you can bounce it off of a layer of the atmosphere. You can bounce it off of that and it'll hit them at a better angle, and it's like it'll go further. That's pretty cool. If you want to look into that, you can. Now, if you want to get licensed, there are a couple things you have to do. Well, there's only one thing you have to do, but there's multiple steps to that thing. And that one thing is take a test. It's literally just I think it's 35 questions, and I think you have to get like 26 of them right. So you just have to take this certain test and pass it, and you have your technician's license, which, I mean, there are 3 levels to being licensed. Technicians is at the bottom, then there's another one, then there's extra, which is the top level. But all you need to actually use radio is just a technician's license and some equipment. Why do you say that there's more than one step to that? Well, you have to study for it, and it is a very hard test. I haven't taken it yet, but I've taken a practice test, which is just it, except it doesn't matter if you pass or fail. It's just for practice. And I did pass, but it was like barely. And I've spent a lot of time looking into radio. But it is possible. Literally, I'm pretty sure an infant could get a technician's license so long as they pass the test. So there's no age requirements, none of that. If you want to study, there's a couple things you can do. You can go to a class. That's what I did. You can also get a book and it's like a ham radio operation manual, and it goes so in depth, but it's really useful, really good resource. I would recommend it. It is a big book though, and maybe a little pricey. So there's also the ARRL. They have a website with tons of good information on it. They're also the ones who made the book, but they're a pretty good resource. So if you want to look into radio more, I'd recommend going there. And with that wraps up my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope this is the take that I post, because this is not the first take. No, it is not. And I am so tired of recording these. I should cut that out at the end. No, I shouldn't. Do I? I'm sorry. You're in the home stretch. You're literally on the last slide. Okay. Whew. So I hope that you look into radio on your own. I found it really interesting. I hope that you found this interesting, but if you didn't, it's over now. And also I don't know why you watched the whole thing. If you didn't enjoy it, just don't watch it. Okay, but bye, I guess. Yeah, I think that's, yes, okay. Goodbye. 13 minutes. Oh,